call to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could we have roll call, please?
Yes, ma'am. Rosa Holloway,
Here.
Carmela Quindo,
Here.
Maria Carney,
Here.
Don Grisby is an excused absence, Jeff Rivera,
Here.
David Bridle.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Did everybody have a chance to read the minutes? If so, do I have a motion?
I'll second it.
I motion to approve the minutes.
You get a second?
Yeah,
All
I'll
in
second it.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. We have our first item on the agenda,
Ordinance number 2021-46.
2021. Hang on a second. 146.
Actually, good afternoon, Andre Anderson, Community Development Director. It's actually ordinance 2021-46. I think there was an error in the.
Oh, there's this 146.
I understand.
Okay.
It's corrected later down on the report.
Oh, yeah, I see that. Yeah.
So this is an amendment to our Land Development Code and to the City Code regarding the sign regulations. It's section 3-19.5, and it relates to exemptions for signs that are exempt from permitting. And a couple years ago, we went through and we overhauled the sign regulations to ensure that it was consistent with state statutes with respect to writing clear provisions in there and to have neutral standards within it. And this amendment tonight is to address some concerns that were raised by council members as well as by the public with respect to interpretation of the code. And so we provided provisions in here to ensure that it's easier to interpret and that it's easier for code enforcement to enforce, and also to provide for a higher level of aesthetics and to avoid clutter within the city, specifically related to political signs and signs that are related to realtors. And so what we have done is we looked at a couple of regulations, and the one that we amended and chose to work with is that of the city of Kissimmee. So this is actually identical to the city of Kissimmee. We thought it was appropriate to do that. One, because we're adjacent jurisdictions, and two, it would be easier to enforce from jurisdiction to jurisdiction because there would be the same consistent standards. So when it comes to political signs, the code has two areas, one for residential districts and one for non-residential, which is considered like commercial areas. And previously we had multifamily listed in there, and it still is part of that, but the council at their meeting thought that it would be more appropriate to just call it non-residential, period. And just for some clarification as to why there's comments from the city council, was because of the unfortunate passing of council member Cooper, we had to accelerate this provision in our code because we have to now hold a special election. And so there were some provisions that we wanted to address before the next election, which would have been next year. However, we had to accelerate it now. And so because of our scheduling, we could not bring this item to you first before we brought it to the city council. So we brought this item to the city council for their first reading. We're bringing it back to you for your first reading and recommendation, and then back to the city council for adoption. So your recommendation will still be provided to the city council prior to their meeting, which is scheduled for next week, Thursday, July 15th. So moving forward, so we have it broken into two areas, residential and non-residential. So as you can see on here, for location, it has to be on private property, and they have to receive the property owner's consent. As far as the number of maximum signs, it's 1 per property, and it's per political sign per candidate, per ballot issue or political issue, 1 sign per site. And the maximum square footage for residential is 3 square feet. For non-residential, it's 32 square feet. Of course, these can be double-sided. The maximum height in residential area is 4 feet. In non-residential areas, it's 8 feet. That has not really changed from what we have currently today. Illumination, there's none. They cannot be illuminated in any fashion. As far as the time limit on these signs, there is a 30-day that you're allowed to have it up 30 days prior to the actual referendum item, or 90 days prior to election for a candidate. It has to be removed per the statutes 106.1435, and this specifically is that it has to be removed within 30 days following one of the following, whether it's withdrawal of the candidacy, that person, his or her candidacy for that office, whether they're eliminated as a candidate, or whether they actually got elected to the office. So within 30 days of any of those actions, they need to remove the sign. If it's not removed, then the city has the ability to remove the sign per the statute. And of course, any costs incurred by the city will be passed on to the property owner, being that the property owner is the person that we would be able to send any invoices for payment to. So obviously it behooves the property owner to ensure that these signs are taken down once the election has occurred. The same standards apply also to non-residential areas as far as time limit. Then for real estate property listing signs, this one, again, we made some modifications here. Again, private property only. For residential districts, property owner's consent. And for non-residential, the same thing. For residential, 1 sign per property. So if the property owner wants to sell a property, they can have multiple signs, no matter how large the sign is in residential districts. However, in non-residential districts, you can have multiple signs based on the linear front footage on the roadway. If it's less than or equal to 300 linear feet, you can have 1 per frontage. If it's greater than 300 linear feet of road frontage, 2 per frontage, and that's the maximum. Again, regarding the copy area, 3 square feet for residential areas, double-sided, and for non-residential, it is 32 square feet, double-sided. Maximum height is 6 feet, and maximum height for non-residential is 8 feet. Again, no illumination. And time limit for these signs upon listing of the property, and then 7 days after the sale or lease of that property, both for residential and for non-residential. This amendment is consistent with the growth management strategic plan goal. And TRG and staff at our meeting in June 22nd recommend approval of ordinance 2021-46, and ask that the Planning Commission recommends approval. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the City Council held its first meeting on this item on June 24th, and your recommendation tonight will be forwarded to the City Council at its meeting on July 15th. Have any questions?
Anybody, any question? I have a question. What if the property sits on the corner and has 2 road frontages?
Again, it's the linear foot frontages. So
Okay.
on 2 properties, if it's under 300 square feet, it's 1 per frontage.
Okay, that's for the commercial. What if it's a house that
1.
sits? 1, okay, okay. That's all I needed to know.
This is basically to avoid what happened last year, having like quadruple
Yes,
signs
that was
out
part of the
there.
complaints that we had,
Yeah.
where because we had multiple signs on non-residential, it was unclear whether or not it meant 10 signs per property or 10 signs total, whether 10 signs could be combined into one and make sort of a billboard. And so to avoid those ambiguities, we decided to revise the code to be a little more explicit and a lot clearer.
Question. With the property owner's consent, is it verbal, or you guys going to require, for coding purposes, enforcement purposes, some kind of written documentation?
Well, I mean, I don't know. That's a very good question. At this point, I don't know that we actually check whether or not they have written consent, but I presume that if there is an infraction and we notify the property owner, they would be aware of what the code says. And it's my understanding that the city clerk will be providing a copy of this set of code requirements to the individual politicians or people running for office so that they're aware of all the rules. But that's a great point. If you want to make a recommendation that it be written, we can add that as a
Yeah,
recommendation
say
in our
for
document.
instance, if I have a vacant piece of property, I don't drive by there every day to see if somebody put a sign up or not.
Sure.
And then if the sign is actually removed after the election. So, as per the code, I could get fined or pay a fine if that sign is up there and I did not give anybody consent. So yes, it probably should be in writing.
That's a great
In
recommendation.
real estate, we have to get consents from the owner, and we have to get in written form that they actually want a sign up or not.
Right.
Yeah, I would think that enforcement would be via the code enforcement process, so property owners would be notified of any violation if the issue arose.
But see here, it says the city will go out and remove the signs, 7 days after the election?
No, 7
Yes.
days, that's for real estate, 7 days after it's listed, sold or leased, or within 30 days.
30 days
Yes.
on the election?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm sure the code enforcement would not be sending that property owner a notice that there's a sign still up there. If they remove the signs after the 30 days, then the property owner could be fined even though he never knew it was out there.
Again, I think if the planning commission desires to send a recommendation with your approval, I'm assuming, for a written notification or written owner's consent, then that would make it a lot clearer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Generally, everybody asks, can I put a sign up on your property anyway? So if they say yes, you have your forms right with you and it's just signed right here and we're good to go, no big deal.
Exactly.
So given that,
Thank you.
Then I have another question for clarification.
Oh.
Would government-owned property be considered non-residential?
Government
Under
property-
this,
government property is exempt from this. This is not, these signs cannot be placed on public property, only private property.
okay.
Well,
I want to clarify something. So when they come in, they don't come in to get a permit for these signs.
Nope.
So the only time it would arise that they would need consent is if a violation is going to be sent out. So the consent, I don't know how well it would help because they're not coming in for a permit. You see what I'm saying? So, and the only time that I assume that an enforcement notice would be sent out first before they just pick up the sign, correct?
Again, I don't work in
Okay.
code enforcement, so I'm not sure how they actually code enforce items. I would guess that they would wait the 30 days before they make any action. And at 31 days, they'd probably notify the property owner that there is a sign on their property before we actually do anything.
and then give the property owner time to remove the sign, because if he did not actually okay for that sign to be put up, and he doesn't know that there is a sign up, whoever put it up should be responsible for the fine.
Yes, I must state very strongly, I don't work code enforcement, but typically they'll give a courtesy notice of some violation, then they'll
Then they'll.
enact something
Yes.
further.
So the city wouldn't just go through and after the 30 days, just remove all the signs and send out,
Typically, you get like
always,
typically you
whatever.
get like 14 days or a certain time span. They'll send something to the owner saying, hey, this is in violation. You have this amount of days before we start imposing fines for taking the sign out.
Actually, what code enforcement does is they'll send a courtesy notice that there's a violation. And then, if they hear nothing, they may do a formal notice of violation and notice of hearing, which will fall before the special magistrate. And then, at that point, the special magistrate would hear the matter, and if there's a finding of noncompliance with code, there'd be a finding of noncompliance with code and a time to correct. And if there's a failure to correct within the order of the special magistrate, at that point in time,
So
a fine
that,
may be imposed.
Yeah,
So
They give them
it's,
plenty of time.
it's a substantial amount of time.
so that sign could basically be out there for 90 days or 120 days before it actually,
It's not gonna linger. I think-
Linger
I don't
that
think- I
long.
don't think that it's gonna linger to that degree.
I still feel, the owner should, I mean, some owners don't know that signs were put on their properties, and they should be asked. I mean, that's common courtesy,
I don't think the city would ask for that for these temporary signs. That's more of a permanent sign kind of thing. But I see your point, but I don't see code enforcement asking for that. But that's just me.
Well, I guess we don't have anybody in the audience, do we? Do we have any other questions?
I have no more questions.
Thank you very much.
Can we get a motion to approve it?
Well,
I motion to approve it with the condition that with private properties, we get a written consent from the owner in case
A
they
written
have,
consent?
a written consent in case they have to get fined, that they know that they had the consent to put the sign up.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
And I think that concludes our meeting, right?
Yep, we have a meeting on the, regular meeting will be on Tuesday, the 20th of July, the third Tuesday of the month.
Okay, so we still have a regular meeting coming up.
Yep, this was a special meeting,
This was special.
and the regular meeting will be held on the 20th of this month, 6
Okay,
p.m.
very good.
Thank you. very much.
Well, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second?
Second.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
All be safe.
Thank you all.